The rain was relentless, like the sky itself had broken open. Jack didn't know it yet, but around the next bend he'd find a woman in chains, and his life would never be the same. The storm had not let up all day. Heavy sheets of rain slapped the windshield of Jackie's battered old pickup as he squinted through the blur of water and wipers, trying to see the road ahead. Headlights barely cut through the darkness. His knuckles whitened around the steering wheel, not from fear of the road, but from everything else closing in. He had just left another job interview, another "we'll call you," delivered with a rehearsed smile and eyes that already forgot his name. His flannel shirt was still damp from the waiting room chair, and the envelope in his glove compartment carried more overdue notices than hope. Jack's wallet was empty, except for a worn photo of his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. That, and a few crumpled dollars that could maybe stretch to breakfast. In the back seat, Lily slept soundly, her small hands wrapped around her stuffed rabbit. Her chest rose and fell in the soft rhythm of childhood dreams. Jack glanced at her in the rearview mirror, and his heart squeezed. She was everything, the last good thing in a world that had taken everything else. His wife, his job, his confidence. Grief had drained the color from his world, but Lily's presence was a flicker of light he refused to let go. The heater coughed, failing to keep the cold out. The truck's interior smelled faintly of old coffee and rain-soaked clothes. Jack exhaled slowly, fogging up the glass. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic squeal of the wipers and the hum of tires on slick asphalt. Every mile felt like a slow march toward nowhere. But just as he turned down the familiar winding road that led to their one-bedroom rental, something happened. A flicker, something pale, something not right. It flashed in his peripheral vision, just for a second, through the dense trees along the roadside. Jack slammed the brakes. The truck skidded slightly, tires sliding in the mud before coming to a jerky stop. Lily stirred in the back but did not wake. Jack's heart raced, not from fear, something deeper, something instinctual. He looked again, wiping the inside of the windshield. There, just past the trees, a white figure, unmoving, almost blending into the rain. He opened the door. The storm hit him like a wave. Cold needles of rain soaked through his clothes in seconds. His boots sank into the soft, waterlogged ground as he stepped off the road. His breath caught. At first he thought it was a scarecrow, or maybe a mannequin left from a prank, but as he walked closer, he stopped breathing. It was a woman, soaked, shivering, chained to a tree. She wore what was once a wedding gown, now torn, filthy, clinging to her body. Mud streaked her legs and face, bare feet pressed against the wet ground. Her arms were pulled behind the trunk, a thick iron chain binding her at the waist. Her long hair hung in dripping strands, tangled and plastered to her cheeks, and her eyes, wide, frozen, haunted. They locked onto Jack's, pleading, but silent. Jack froze. The rain fell harder, thunder rumbled above, but all he could hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat. What was this? Who would do this? He took a trembling step forward. "Are you okay?" he called out, his voice nearly drowned by the storm. She did not speak, did not move, just stared. There were no lights, no car, no house nearby, just her, alone, abandoned. Jack looked back at the truck, at Lily, then at the woman again. His own life was a mess, barely holding on, crushed by survival. But something about her, this stranger in the storm, cut through it all. He could not walk away. Not from this. Not tonight. Jack did not wait for logic to catch up. He ran. The mud sucked at his boots as he pushed through the underbrush, the chain around the woman's waist clinking softly as the wind howled through the trees. Up close, she looked even worse. Cuts on her arms, dirt caked beneath her fingernails, her face streaked with tears, and something else, shame. It clung to her more tightly than the dress. "I'm going to help you," Jack said, his voice firm though his hands shook. He looked around, half expecting someone to leap out from the shadows, but there was only rain and trees and the aching silence of something unspeakably wrong. The chain was rusted, locked with a padlock so old it looked like it belonged to another era. Jack ran back to the truck, grabbing the only thing he had, an old crowbar and a toolbox buried beneath blankets and Lily S. toys. He worked at the lock with numbed fingers, muttering curses under his breath, not at the metal, but at whoever had done this. Whoever had left her here like she was nothing. The lock finally snapped with a sharp crack. She collapsed forward, but Jack caught her gently. Her body was cold as stone, trembling so hard it made his own limbs shake. For a second, she looked up into his eyes. Still no words, just those haunted, broken eyes. He pulled off his flannel jacket, wrapping it around her shoulders. It soaked through in seconds, but it was something. "Come on," he said softly. "You're safe now." She didn't fight him, didn't speak, just followed, barefoot and barely able to walk, stumbling beside him as they made their way back toward the truck. Lily was still asleep in the back seat, curled beneath her blanket, unaware that the night had shifted their lives forever. Jack opened the passenger door. The woman hesitated, then climbed in slowly, curling into herself like a wounded animal. Water pooled beneath her. She looked so out of place, this broken bride in a filthy dress, shaking and silent, sitting beside a child's car seat. Jack started the engine. The heater groaned again, blowing out a weak puff of warm air. His fingers were stiff on the wheel. As they drove, Jack kept glancing at her, half afraid she'd vanish, like she wasn't real, like she had been placed there by fate, a test he hadn't studied for. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She turned her head slightly, a whisper so faint he almost missed it. "Eliza." Then her head tilted back against the seat, and her eyes slid shut. Jack tightened his grip on the wheel. His mind was racing. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why would anyone chain a woman to a tree in the middle of nowhere? But none of those questions changed what he already knew in his gut. This woman needed help. And for the first time in months, Jack felt like maybe he still had something to offer. He pulled into the gravel driveway of their rental. The porch light flickered like it always did. The roof sagged a little more every time it rained. But it was shelter. It was all he had. He carried Eliza inside, careful not to wake Lily. The floor creaked under his boots. The walls smelled faintly of mildew and cheap paint. He laid her gently on the couch, grabbed the warmest blanket they had, and tucked it around her. She stirred once but didn't open her eyes. Jack stood there for a long moment. Soaked, cold, completely overwhelmed. His home, barely held together, now held someone else's broken pieces too. He walked to Lily's room and peeked in. She was still asleep, still dreaming. He leaned against the doorframe, heart pounding, clothes dripping onto the floor, unsure what had just happened or what was coming next. He didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. He just sat there in the silence, watching Eliza breathe beneath the blanket. Something about her had changed everything, and somehow, though he couldn't explain why, he knew it was not over. It was only just beginning. Morning came slowly, peeling away the darkness like a second chance. Jack sat at the kitchen table, elbows on the chipped surface, a mug of lukewarm coffee cradled between his hands. The night had left him drained, his thoughts knotted with questions. But there was no time for unraveling. Eliza was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in the blanket like a fragile secret. Her wet dress had dried stiff and crumpled, her tangled hair now spread across the cushion. She looked smaller in the daylight, less like a mystery, more like someone trying not to disappear. Lily padded in quietly, her rabbit tucked under one arm, blinking at the unfamiliar shape on the couch. "Daddy?" she whispered, voice raspy from sleep. "Who's that lady?" Jack stood, crouched beside her. "Her name is Eliza. She was in trouble, so we helped her." Lily stared a moment longer, then nodded, as if this kind of thing happened every Tuesday. He fixed her a bowl of cereal and started packing the small lunch he made her on school days, even though lately most of it came back untouched. When Eliza finally sat up, she said nothing, just pulled the blanket tighter and looked around, unsure if she was still safe. Jack offered her coffee. She took it with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the room like it might vanish. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently. She shook her head. The next few days passed in quiet fragments. Eliza did not talk much, only yes or no when absolutely necessary. She kept her distance, her presence like a breeze slipping through a cracked window, soft, almost unnoticed. But she helped. She folded laundry that had been sitting in a basket for a week. She fixed the cabinet door Jack kept meaning to repair. She cleaned the cracked bathroom mirror without being asked. And when Lily tripped and tore her stuffed rabbit, Eliza stitched it back together, her fingers working gently and expertly, like she had done it 1,000 times before. Jack watched all this without pushing. He didn't need answers right away. He just needed peace. And somehow, without speaking a word of it, Eliza had brought it with her. It was Lily who reached her first. One afternoon, Jack came home from looking for work and froze in the doorway. Lily sat on the floor, coloring. Eliza sat beside her, legs tucked beneath her, a crayon in her hand. Lily giggled, a real, unfiltered laugh, the kind Jack hadn't heard in what felt like years. Eliza smiled, not big, not loud, but real. Jack set down the bag of groceries and just listened. The house didn't feel heavy anymore, it breathed again. Later that evening, as he did dishes, Jack noticed something odd. His back didn't ache with dread, his chest didn't feel tight with helplessness. He looked over at Eliza, sitting quietly with Lily, and something clicked. This woman, this silent, shattered soul, was slowly putting his home back together. Not with words, but with presence. He still didn't know who she was, but somehow she had already begun to matter, and for the first time in a long, long time, Jack began to hope again. The house had gone still again. Lily was fast asleep, her rabbit curled under one arm, the soft rhythm of her breath filling the tiny room. The space heater buzzed quietly in the corner, for once doing its job without complaint. Jack sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of tea he had already forgotten he made. Across from him, Eliza stood at the window, arms crossed over her chest, watching the wind stir the bare trees under the moonlight. Her silhouette was calm, but something about her posture had changed. She looked like someone gathering courage. Then softly, so softly Jack almost missed it, she spoke. "I was supposed to be married that day." Her voice cracked, brittle as dry wood. Jack looked up slowly, heart thudding. He did not speak. He just waited. Eliza didn't turn around. Her eyes stayed fixed on the dark outside. "I didn't love him. I didn't even know him. My family said love was for stories, not for women like me. They called it duty, said I should be proud." She paused, swallowed, her shoulders trembled once. "I ran," she whispered. "I ran the night before the wedding. I just couldn't do it." The silence stretched, heavy with what was coming. "They found me the next morning. Dragged me out of the bus station. No police, no questions, just shame and silence." Jack leaned forward, fists tightening under the table. "They chained me," she said, and her voice broke. She finally turned, eyes full of unshed tears, but no pity, only pain. "They took me out to the woods where no one would see. Said I needed to learn what disgrace felt like. Said maybe then I would stop running from what I owed them." Jack sat frozen, breath caught between anger and disbelief. "And they left me," Eliza continued, "chained to that tree and that dress, to think about what I had done." Her voice dropped. "I thought I would die out there." A beat passed. I started to believe I deserved it. Jack stood slowly, walked over, placed a hand on her shoulder, gentle but steady. "You didn't," he said, voice thick. You didn't deserve any of it." She looked up, eyes searching his, and then, almost in a whisper, "I thought no one would stop, that maybe I didn't matter enough to be saved." Jack's throat tightened, his eyes burned. He didn't have a speech, he wasn't good with words, but he knew what truth felt like. "You were never too lost," he said quietly. "You were just waiting to be found by someone who could see your worth." Her tears came then, not like a flood, but like a dam finally allowed to crack. She fell into his arms, and for the first time since he buried his wife, Jack held someone not out of duty, but because his heart asked him to. They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. Two broken souls had recognized each other in the storm, and for the first time in years, they both began to believe. Maybe they still deserved something beautiful. Days passed, like pages turning in a book neither of them had written. The little house remained cramped, the paint still peeled, and the fridge still hummed too loud. But something had shifted. The silence that once haunted the space had turned gentle, like the pause between songs instead of the void between tragedies. Jack got a call from the school district. They needed someone for maintenance work, nothing fancy, just someone who could show up, fix pipes, change bulbs, keep the place running. He said yes without thinking. It was not just a job. It was air. It was something to breathe again. Meanwhile, Eliza stayed home with Lily, who now clung to her side like she had always belonged there. Mornings began with pancakes and laughter. Eliza would braid Lily's hair while Jack packed lunch. In the evenings, they colored together or watched the same scratched-up DVDs over and over. But not everything was peaceful. The outside world had started to notice. One afternoon, as Jack fixed the screen door, his neighbor, Mr. Cranford, an older man with more opinions than teeth, wandered over. "You got a guest?" he asked, peering inside through narrowed eyes. Jack nodded cautiously. "A friend. Helping out." Cranford grunted. "Heard some chatter. A woman folks don't recognize. Showing up at school pickup, quiet type." Jack felt the tension ripple in his chest. He kept his voice even. "She's family." The man stared for a long moment. "That's so?" Jack nodded again, firmer this time. "That's so." Cranford didn't press, but Jack could feel it in the air. Whispers, questions, the kind that grow legs when people do not have answers. That night, Jack sat on the porch alone, watching dusk settle like a blanket over the neighborhood. Eliza joined him quietly, holding 2 mugs of tea. "They're starting to notice me," she said without fear. "Just honesty." "I know," Jack replied. "I can leave." He looked at her sharply. "No." "But no." His voice was calm but final. "You're not running anymore." Eliza blinked, surprised. "You live here now, with us." There was no ceremony, no declaration, just a quiet truth they both agreed to. Inside, Lily peeked through the window. "Mom!" she called out suddenly, grinning. "Come see what I made." Eliza froze. Jack looked at her gently. "She's been calling you that all week." Her lips trembled, but she smiled anyway. Later that night, Eliza tucked Lily into bed, smoothing her hair as the little girl clutched her rabbit. "I'm glad you're my mommy now," Lily whispered. "You make the house feel happy." Eliza kissed her forehead, heart aching in the best way. Outside the room, Jack leaned against the wall, listening. That tiny voice, that tiny word, Mom. It echoed deeper than any vow. He glanced at Eliza as she came out of the room. No longer a guest, no longer a mystery, just theirs. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of quiet morning where everything felt still. Too still. Jack had just returned from his first week of work, the smell of motor oil and chalk dust still clinging to his clothes. Eliza was in the kitchen with Lily, helping her cut shapes from construction paper for school. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate raps against the door. Jack's stomach dropped. Eliza froze, scissors suspended mid-air. Even Lily paused, sensing the sudden shift in the air. Jack opened the door. A police officer stood there, mid-40s, clean-shaven, a neutral expression that somehow still felt like judgment. "Mr. Callahan?" Jack nodded slowly. The officer cleared his throat. "We received a call. A neighbor reported an unfamiliar woman living here, said there might be a concern for the child's safety." Jack's jaw clenched. "She's my family," he said, voice steady. The officer nodded, as if that was expected. "Mind if I come in?" Jack hesitated, then stepped aside. The officer entered, eyes scanning the modest home. Peeling walls, a humming fridge, a child's drawings taped to the wall. Eliza stood by the table, her body rigid, hands trembling as she gripped the back of a chair. Lily moved closer to her, instinctively protective. The officer approached. "Ma'am, can I ask your name?" "Eliza," she said quietly, almost a whisper. "Do you have any ID?" She hesitated. Jack stepped in. "She's been through a lot. She's staying here while she recovers. There's no threat to Lily. If anything, she's the reason my daughter's smiling again." The officer studied them. It was clear he saw more than he said. "I'm not here to make trouble," he finally said. "But people talk, and when a woman with no background shows up out of nowhere, folks worry." He turned to Eliza. "Is there anything I should know? Anything you want to report?" Eliza looked at Jack, then at Lily, then back at the officer. Her lips parted, but no words came, just a slow, tired shake of the head. The officer nodded. "All right, I'll file this as a welfare check, but if anything changes, you call us, understood?" Jack nodded. The officer tipped his hat slightly. "Take care of each other." And then he was gone. The silence afterward was unbearable. Eliza sat down hard on the kitchen chair, burying her face in her hands. Jack stood frozen, heart racing, fists clenched. "I'm sorry," she said through her fingers. "I'm putting you both at risk." "No," Jack said firmly. "You are not a risk. You're a person, and you deserve to be safe." She looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes. "I'm tired of hiding." Jack crouched beside her, placing a hand over hers. "Then don't." He paused. "What if, instead of hiding, you told your story?" She blinked. "What if we stopped letting them control your silence?" Eliza sat back slowly, as if the thought itself was foreign. But in that moment, right there at that worn-down kitchen table, something shifted inside her. For the first time since she arrived, Eliza wasn't just surviving. She was preparing to speak. The church basement smelled faintly of old wood and lemon polish. Rows of folding chairs had been arranged in a circle occupied by women of all ages, some with toddlers on their laps, others with bandages still fresh, all carrying the quiet weight of untold stories. Eliza sat at the edge of the room, her hands clutched tightly in her lap. It had been Jack's idea. "You do not have to tell anyone," he had said, "but if you do, it might change someone's life." At first she had refused. The idea of speaking her truth out loud was terrifying. But then she saw Lily standing in the doorway the next morning, watching her with wide, trusting eyes. "You make the house feel safe," Lily had whispered, and that was enough. Now, as the room fell silent, the facilitator, a kind-eyed woman with a clipboard and a warm smile, gestured toward her. "Eliza," she said softly, "if you feel ready, the floor is yours." Eliza's heartbeat thundered in her chest. She stood slowly, knees trembling, all eyes turned to her. "I was supposed to be married," she began. Her voice was quiet, but it did not crack. "They told me love was foolish, that duty came first. I said no. I ran." She looked around the room. No one spoke. No one moved. "My family, they found me, dragged me into the woods, said I shamed them. They chained me to a tree and left me there like garbage." Gasps echoed softly from the circle. Eliza took a shaky breath. I do not remember the first night. I do not remember the hunger. I just remember thinking, this is what happens when you stop being what they want you to be. She paused. But someone stopped, a man I did not know, a father just trying to survive. He looked at me, not like I was broken, but like I was worth saving. Her voice grew steadier now, stronger. And that moment, that choice, brought me back to life. The women in the room were crying now, some silently, some openly. One stood up and walked to Eliza, wrapped her in a trembling hug. That was me, the woman whispered, 10 years ago. I just never said it out loud. Eliza broke down then, not from pain, but from the weight lifting off her chest. After the meeting, women surrounded her. Some asked for help. Others simply touched her hand as they passed, their eyes saying what words could not. That night, Eliza walked into their little home not as a stranger, but as a survivor, as a mother, as a light. Jack greeted her with a quiet smile and a warm cup of tea. You told them? He asked. She nodded, eyes glowing. And they listened? Yes, she said softly. And then they spoke too. He sat beside her on the porch, their fingers entwined, the stars blinking overhead like they were trying to listen as well. For the first time since that stormy night, Eliza wasn't haunted by silence. She had turned it into strength. 1 year later, the house was still small, the paint still peeled in corners, the screen door still squeaked when you opened it, and the fridge still groaned like an old man who had seen too much. But now the sunlight poured through the windows like it belonged there, like it had been waiting for the right time to return. Laughter echoed from the kitchen, real belly-deep laughter. Jack stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with a finesse he never had before. He wore the same old work boots, but now they were scuffed from labor that meant something. Maintenance work at the school kept him busy, kept food on the table, and gave him pride he had not felt in years. Across the table, Eliza sat with Lily, carefully helping her braid her hair. Her hands were steady, her smile soft but sure. She was not the same woman Jack had pulled from the rain a year ago. She was stronger now, brighter, not untouched by pain, but reshaped by it. She volunteered at a shelter 3 nights a week, spoke to women who were still stuck in silence, listened to them, held their hands, told them they mattered. Her story had become a lifeline. Her scars had become her power. Lily giggled as Eliza tied the braid with a pink ribbon. Can I wear this to the community day tomorrow? She asked. Of course, Eliza said, smoothing her hair. You'll look beautiful. Jack watched them from across the room, a warmth blooming in his chest he once thought he would never feel again. Later that evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, her rabbit still tucked under one arm, Jack and Eliza sat on the porch. The fireflies blinked lazily in the humid air. The world was quiet in the way only small towns can be. They sat close, no need to speak, but Jack did anyway. You ever think about that night? He asked quietly. Eliza smiled without turning. Every day. Do you wish it had gone differently? She paused, then shook her head. If it had, I would not be here. I would not have Lily or you. Jack reached for her hand, held it gently. Eliza looked at him, eyes no longer haunted. You saved me, she said. Jack shook his head. We saved each other. A long silence followed, not uncomfortable, just full of things no one needed to say. The wind stirred the trees, and in that moment, under the stars and porch light, something unspoken passed between them, something simple, something real. Love, not loud, not flashy, just present, steady, chosen. Jack leaned back, closed his eyes, and breathed. He finally understood. They were never meant to rescue each other. They were simply meant to show up, broken and scared, and offer what little they had. And that had been enough. more than enough, because from the wreckage of their lives, they had built something no storm could ever take again, a family. Sometimes the broken save the broken, and when love is given freely, even by those who have nothing, it comes back as a miracle.